I thought I'd make a short video, or try to keep it short, on my flight simulator cockpit that I'm building. I'm going to get right into what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. Right in the front here, I have two 40-inch TVs. Both of them are 1080p HD TVs, and they give me a really good definition as far as the flight simulator program. Each TV is only 40-inch, but they also stick out or extend outward on each side by about 1 foot. So the two screens are more than big enough to give me a very good view inside the cockpit. And back to the front of the simulator, I have two computers. The one on the right is running Airmanager, and the displays for that are the two pico-projectors, the two little black boxes you see there, and the larger computer runs the flight simulation program. The pico-projectors are running in a mirror mode because we are doing rear view projection with these projectors. I also have a mirror in front of one temporarily to show you how I work with Airmanager. Airmanager is being reflected onto the wall right next to the cockpit. And the one thing about taking a video of a projection, whether it be a front view like it is here on the wall, or through inside the cockpit where it's a rear view projection, the brightness or light of the projection image kind of blinds the lens on the cell phone camera that I'm using. So it's very difficult to take a picture of the instrument panel. To give you a demonstration of this, you can see the panel on here. That looks very good. It also looks very good inside the cockpit, but it depends on the angle of the camera. If the camera is off too far to the left or right, it kind of blinds it. And the image on the wall is fairly good with the camera. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move this lens out of the way, and now the image is reflected on the rear side of the cockpit panel. And I'll move it back here, and we're going to go to a full screen. I'm going to click show. It loads to a full screen. Now you can see the full screen of the panel. I made two panels, one for the left, one for the right. As you can see how it the light kind of fades out on the cell phone camera, so you don't see the colors that well. As I come in here, you can see the colors much better. So now I'll go back and turn the camera back around, and you get a better view inside the rear part of the instrument panel. So I have two panels running, and both of them are displayed on the left and right side. We'll go around to the inside of the cockpit. And from the inside, what I see, no matter what angle I look at, I see a good, colorful, and clear image of all the instruments, including the digital information for the radios. But like I said, with the cell phone camera, as I come in, you can see the digits are turning kind of white. That's not what I see. What I see, no matter what angle I look at, no matter what position my head is in, I see a nice, clear, colorful image. But again, with the cell phone camera, it's very difficult to do that. For an example, the artificial horizon, if I angle the camera just right, now you can see what I see. And I see that, again, no matter where my head is, or the position of my head. And so all the instruments are very easy to read. They're colorful, and the images are sharp. I'm limited on my memory on my cell phone, so I have to stop and then restart it after I unload the pictures for the video. So I'll be back in 1 second. Okay, so I'm back in the cockpit. I also want to mention the pico projectors are capable of doing 300 lumens, 450 lumens, or 600 lumens. And what I did for the pico projector is I turned them down to 300 lumens, and it's still very easy to see. Although during the daytime I'll run them at 450 lumens, not really necessary. You're a bit on the bright side, but 600 lumens would be too bright. 300 lumens is fine. So if you decide to get any other type of pico projector, you want to make sure that it is at least 1080p. I can't stress that enough because the gauges would not be very sharp if you did not. And also a minimum of 300 lumens. The 450 lumens is great for during the daytime. Even with the sunlight shining through the window next to my fuselage, it's very easy to see all the instruments. And again, I turned them down to 300 lumens for making this video because they tend to blind the video out from the amount of light hitting the cell phone camera lens. So hopefully it'll look a little bit better. Also, the other thing I want to talk about is as far as making this video, I'm not trying to boast on my flying skills. I am a licensed pilot. I am not flying anymore because of my age. But again, I'm not bragging or trying to boast on anything here. It's just to show you how well Airmanager works with a simulation. Also on how well the A2A simulation company had made the A2A Cherokee 180. It's very realistic, and it operates very realistically. And so the other thing I wanted to say is that with the precision that was put into the A2A Cherokee, if you run the fuel tanks on, say, the left tank, you'll use that fuel up and the airplane will become imbalanced. And you'll tend to want to keep putting aileron control in to keep it level. So you want to switch your tanks back and forth as you use the fuel up. Maybe like burn 10 gallons off on the left tank and then switch over to the right tank. It just makes flying a little bit easier. The other thing is the electric fuel pump versus the mechanical fuel pump. The mechanical fuel pump is something that we want to make sure that it works, and also the electric fuel pump. And we do that in the checklist. I am using a real checklist from my training days when I trained in a Piper Warrior. And so it's a real list that I'm going to use here. It's for PA-28. It works very well for this type of aircraft. One of the other things with A2A is the primer. If you overprime the aircraft, when you go to start it, it will flood the engine, and you'll have to reset your scenario in order to get it started. So you don't want to prime the aircraft more than maybe 2 or 3 pumps on the primer. That's all it really takes. And that's only if it's cold. If it's warm, you don't need to prime it at all. And you can tell if it's warm by looking at the oil temperature. The computer remembers when's the last time you shut it off, and how long it's been, and whether the engine is cold or warm. So another realistic feature put out by the A2A simulation company. And so I'm going to pause again here, unload my video from the camera, and then start it up, and we'll get started in on the checklist. Okay, so I'm back in the cockpit. The other thing I'd like to mention is that all of my buttons, switches, and rotary encoders are controlled by Leo Banar's USB card. The USB cards work great for the buttons and the switches and the analog controls. And I also use a program called FSUIPC. The rotary encoders are a little bit difficult with Leo Bodnar's USB card, and I'll demonstrate that as we go through the checklist in the video. There's one other card I use, and that's an Arduino, and that controls the audio panel, and I use MobiFlight for that. And the only reason that I did that is because I needed 3 outputs for the inner, middle, and outer marker. Otherwise, the Arduino would not really be necessary. So without further ado, we will get to our checklist. And there's a reason we use a checklist because, again, I think as I said before, we just need to verify that everything is functioning properly. So we'll treat this as a real aircraft and use this checklist, as I said, that I used in flight school. It's for a PA-28, and it works well with the Piper Cherokee 180. So we'll start with the first one here. We have seat belts and shoulder harnesses are up and fastened. Our flaps are up, and I'm going to make sure my flap lever is all the way down. And I'm not going to go back and forth between all the controls. All my switches and buttons are working fantastically. And it just kind of gets me uncoordinated trying to look at the list and moving the camera back and forth. Okay, so we'll continue on. Brakes are set. I'm going to set my brake handle. Airspeed indicator is 0, and our VSI is level position. Our radio and our lights are all off. All my switches are off. And the fuel selector we're going to put onto the lowest tank. And let's see, circuit breakers are all in. Starting the engine, we're going to turn our master switch on, and that's on. And mixture is full rich, and carburetor heat is cold. And electric fuel pump is on. Maybe you can hear that. Okay. So where were we? Let's see, electric fuel pump is on, our fuel pressure is checked, and we'll come over here and we look and we see our fuel pressure. I'm going to turn the electric fuel pump off, and you see our pressure drop. I'm going to turn it back on, so you can see that the electrical fuel pump is working. The throttle open 1/4 of an inch. Prime is necessary. I'm going to give it probably 2 pumps on the prime. Sometimes I give it 3. You don't need to do more than 3. Propeller area is clear, and the starter engaged. We're going to idle it at 1,000 RPMs, and we're going to check the oil pressure right away and make sure we have oil pressure. We don't want to ruin the engine, and make sure you do that within 30 seconds. So we'll go ahead and we'll start it up. We'll come up here. And there we go. And it's running. RPMs, 1,000 RPMs. Within 30 seconds, check the oil pressure, and the oil pressure is good. And we'll rev it up a little bit, and we'll just see it goes up into the green. There you go. And we'll bring it back down to 1,000 RPMs. And the last check on this part of the list, electric fuel pump off. We turn our electric fuel pump off. And why do we do that? We want to make sure that the mechanical fuel pump is working. And we turn that off, and we also check the fuel pressure and make sure we still have fuel pressure, because again, we are running on the mechanical fuel pump right now. Now we come up here to pre-taxi, and we're going to switch the tank over to the fullest tank, or just switch to the other tank. And the reason we do that is because we want to make sure that we have fuel in that tank, and the mechanical fuel pump is also working on that tank. Our rotating beacon is on. Turn that on. Our transponder is in standby, and we're going to turn our radio master on. There's our radios, and we're going to turn this switch on to standby. We can turn this on to altitude just to kind of show you something here. You see the light flashing for altitude. That light is flashing, and it's part of the program by Sim Innovation. I do not have an LED light in there. It's just the Sim Innovation what do you call it, instrument. So Sim Innovation can save you a lot of money in gauges and wiring, and it's such a great program. So we're going to go put this back on standby. So we're on standby now. Okay, now we'll go back to our checklist. We're starting the engine, and we're up here on pre-taxi. So again, we switch to the fullest tank. We're on the mechanical fuel pump. Rotating beacon is on. Transponder is standby. We're going to radio ATIS and Uticom, and we can just kind of switch the radio here a little bit. You can see that I can see the green, but you can't. But I'm going to switch that over. And you can hear it. Since we don't need the noise for that, I'm going to go ahead and click that back over, just to show you the radios are working. The DME is also working, and I have that set. The navigation radio, these are your nav, and this is your COM and your COM. So our navigation radio, nav 1 is 109.9 is the ILS, and the 117.0 is the VOR. And the VOR is about 5.9 miles away from the airport, and that also shows right here 5.9 miles. We can switch this over to the ILS, and you see the ILS is 0.2 miles because we're almost sitting on top of it. So we'll come back over here to our checklist and see where we're at again. That's why I say it's hard to move the camera up and down while we're doing the checklist, and keep everything in flow here. So we're on pre-taxi, and we radio ATIS and Uticom, and that will give us the information for the barometric pressure, and then anything that's going on in the airport that a pilot needs to know, like a closed runway or construction work on the airport or whatever. Our heading indicator is set, and so we can see our directional gyro right here. Again, it's kind of hard to see, but I verify that it's set with the magnetic compass. And let's come back here. Our attitude indicator is set, altimeter is set. We set that with the information we get from ATIS, and all radio and nav radios are all on. Before we taxi, we want to check our brakes. We want to make sure we got brakes so we can stop. So I'm going to come up here on the screen. I'm going to release the parking brake and just give it a little bit of throttle to get us moving. And there we go. I'm going to hit the brakes. There you go. And you see that, yes, we have brakes. So I'll put the parking brake back on. We'll come back down here, and we're on taxi. Now the directional gyro, magnetic compass and stuff, and turn coordinator, we want to make sure all these things are working. So when we start taxiing, it's just not taxiing down the runway. We want to look at different things that are working. I'm going to release the parking brake and just give it a little throttle so I can get rolling here a little bit. And we want to look at our turn coordinator and give it a little left rudder, a little right rudder, and we can see the turn coordinator is working. We can also see our DG, or directional gyro, as we hit the pedal, and that is also working. And of course, in the real airplane, we'd look at our artificial horizon. You'd actually see that move up and down a little bit. So we're good with that. We'll idle it back down a little bit here and put the parking brake back on. And now I'm going to pause the video here for a second so I can unload it from my phone and come back and continue on. Okay, so I'm back in the cockpit, and we'll finish off with our checklist here. We're going to do the ground run up. I let the engine idle for quite a few minutes because I want to also demonstrate on the accuracy that A2A put into making the Piper Cherokee 180 simulation aircraft. And so we'll continue with our ground run up here on our checklist. Our parking brake is on, our magneto check at 2,000 RPMs. And we have 1,000 RPMs right now. Our brake is set, parking brake. We're going to bring this up to 2,000 RPMs. I'll kind of zoom in here a little bit. And the magnetos are on both right now. We're going to switch it to the left. And you see the engine's got a terrible skip in it. I'm going to put it back over on both. I'm going to go to the right mag. And the right mag drops about 775 RPMs, which is fine. Go back to both, and we're okay. So the reason that the aircraft will do this in real life is the spark plugs will start to foul because we've idled for such a long time. And in order to clear that, which we must do before we take off, we're going to come over here and we're going to bring our mixture control down, and we're going to lean it out a little bit, about 100 RPMs, and we're going to let that come down a little bit. Right about there. Okay, and I'm gonna, just to clear it out a little quicker, I'm gonna rev the engine up. And we're gonna let it run lean for a little bit. This will heat up the spark plugs and burn off any excess fuel or oil or whatever's on the spark plugs. And they will foul up in the aircraft if you let the engine idle too long. So we're going to let that run for a minute or so here. And one of our other checks on this ground run up is the engine instruments need to be normal, which is our next check. And while we're letting it run here, we can always look and make sure our fuel pressure is good. And we can come over here and look at our oil temperature, and oil pressure is good. Our alternator amps is good. And of course the suction gauge is also okay. And just to verify the amps one more time, I'm going to turn the landing light on, and you see the amps pop up. Instrument lights are on, strobe lights come on, and pitot heat, turn that on. You see, so the alternator amps work perfectly the same as in a real aircraft. Okay, so we've ran it quite a little bit here, so we're going to go ahead and bring our RPMs back down to 2,000 RPMs. Okay, now we're going to check our mag again. We're going to go over to the left mag, and it's still dropping, so that means it's still not clean yet. So we're going to go ahead and let it run some more. I'm going to lean it out a little bit more here. I'll bring it back in just a hair. We're going to let it run for a little bit more. And again, the only reason that I'm doing this video is to show how well Sim Innovation did with Airmanager on making all the instruments and stuff. I did a little tweaking to get my RPM gauge to work exactly right. Little tweaks on some of the other gauges. Nothing that was really that hard to do. Sim Innovation is very supportive in helping anyone using their program. Also, the other reason I did this is to show the accuracy that A2A Simulations put in their simulated aircraft. Not only the Cherokee, but quite a few other ones. The Cherokee 180, in my opinion, is one of the best aircraft I have ever flown ever since I started flight simulation back when the first flight simulator came out by Microsoft. So again, maybe we've had enough time here. Let's see if we're okay yet. And I'm going to go ahead and idle it back down to 2,000. And there we're at 2,000. We'll switch from both to left. And we're good. And back to both. And back to the right, and we are good. So just to show you the accuracy and the A2A Piper Cherokee, I think they did a wonderful job in it, and I can't say enough for Sim Innovation. They have done a terrific job, and their support is incredible. So I'm going to pause the video here and come right back. So here I am back in the cockpit again, and I just wanted to show you a couple more things and I will end this video. The Arduino that I'm using is controlling the outer, inner, middle marker, and I wanted to show you how that lights up. It works very well. And also on the Leo Bodnar's USB card, for the rotary encoders, I'll show you how I set my encoder. When I rotate the dial or the rotary encoder clockwise, I set it for 10 degrees per click. And counterclockwise, I set it 1 degree per click. And I will show you that in a minute here. And again, this video is not on flying. I keep the group videos away from people just kind of boasting or showing off how they can fly and do all that stuff. That's not what this group is about. The group is about building a flight simulator, and I try to keep the group exactly along those lines. So let me unpause this and I'll just show you the marker lights. Okay, so we're coming into our, as you can see on the instruments, our runway is a little bit to the right. We'll come a little bit to the right here. And it's also telling us to fly up, but we'll run into it here in a second. Again, I'm going to come off to the side here, make it a little easier for you to see. And we should be hitting the marker light very soon here. And you can see our ILS needle is almost in the center, and there's our light. And while we're waiting for the middle marker to come up here, I'm going to show you on the rotary encoder. If you watch this, I click it, it moves 10 degrees at a time. I've got to fly here a little bit while I'm kind of showing you. So I'll get a little bit tricky here. And if I rotate it counterclockwise, you see it's just moving 1 degree at a time. So if I needed it to rotate the bezel 360 degrees, it would take a long time if I set it for 1 degree per click. So let me get this airplane down a little bit here. Do a little bit of flying here. We're coming into the runway. Okay, again, back on this one. Now if I wanted to do rotate it all the way around to 150 degrees, it would take forever doing it 1 click. So that's one of the reasons I set it where I can go all the way around quickly to 150. Let me try to fly here a little bit too. So all the way around to 150, and then back it up until I center the needle. It just makes it easier. So we'll come back here, and there's our middle marker. And now we'll wait for our inner marker. There's our inner marker. Again, I'm going to pause the video right here. So I believe I got everything covered. I'm not going to go into the checklist as far as takeoff and landing procedures. You can follow that. I've uploaded the checklist to the group so you can find it in the file section. So happy flying. I hope you picked up some information from this video, and I wish you all the luck with building your simulator.